On episode 356 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Michele Stanford and discuss her book, Informed Consent. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/356. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. I met today's guest at a writers' conference, and the instant I asked her about her book, it became abundantly clear to me in that moment that this woman does her research. She has dived into this health and nutrition and the healthcare system and really understands it from front to back, from a historical perspective to what has brought us to today. And her book is called Informed Consent. It's a really good book for understanding what is going on with our food, what is going on with our healthcare system, and why things are the way they are, and why we are all so unwell, and what we can do about it. So with no further ado, here's Michele Stanford. Michele, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you, Alan. I'm very happy to be here.
Now, the book we're going to talk about today is called Informed Consent, and it's kind of interesting when I see the title. It just seems very serious and very, legal. And as I kind of got into the book and started hearing, and some of this history you taught in there, because you've done your research, I have to admit, you have really impressed me with the research that went into this book to not only understand what is going on today, but why and where it came from. So the history all the way up to today, to kind of bring someone all the way into what has happened to our healthcare system, what has happened to our food, why are we unwell, why are we all sick, and what we can do about it. So excellent book, and like I said, comes off very, very serious, because it is a very, very serious topic.
Yes, it is, and it really was a labor of love, and it began with my own health issues and trying to find answers on my own, because my doctors just were not able to help me, and I was at a point where I really had to figure out what is wrong with me and how do I fix it. And as I began researching, and I went down all of these different rabbit holes and began learning. And as an former educator, I love learning anyway. And so I was just fascinated. And I thought, there's a lot of, if I didn't know all this, there are many other people who don't know this either. And so it just that was a catalyst for writing the book.
Yeah. As I got into the history of it, because I really enjoyed your story part of it. I guess I'm going to say enjoyed. That actually is probably kind of the wrong word to say. But, I felt what was going on with you and how, you were going through a difficult time, and then you're trying to find the answers. And, in some cases, your doctor just really wasn't all that helpful. But you knew there was something. You knew there was something out there. And what I find just almost somewhat appalling is that there'll be a study that'll tell us, that bacon causes cancer, or this causes cancer. But then we'll have another study that come back and say, well, no, we actually studied it again, and it's fine. The problem I get is, and that's what I want to talk about, is that this is not new stuff. I mean, the things that we're learning about nutrition, or supposed to be learning about nutrition now with the studies, a lot of the information that's truly coming out as being the end-all answer came out of a doctor, he's actually a dentist, named Dr. Weston A. Price. And this was back in the 30s that he was doing the bulk of his work initially. Can you tell us a little bit about Dr. Price and what he was doing, and why he was doing it, and what some of his findings were?
Yes, I just found that completely fascinating as well. Dr. Weston A. Price was a dentist, and in the 20s particularly, he noticed that there was a huge rise in the amount of cavities in individuals, and he couldn't figure out why. He wanted to know why was this happening all of a sudden. And so what he did was he used his own monies, because he didn't want to be influenced. Other people in companies offered to finance him on his trips, and he refused their monies because he wanted a completely unbiased research and discovery of what was going on. So his hypothesis was that it was the food, and that it was nutritional deficiencies that were causing all of the rise in cavities and deformities too, of the shape of the mouth and the arch. And so he visited indigenous peoples around the world, in Switzerland and Alaska and Australia and Africa and South America. And all of these people groups that he visited were isolated from modern society. So their only food sources were what they sourced locally. They did not have any industrialized foods. So everything that they consumed was what he considered nutrient dense. And what he found was they were healthy. They had no cavities. And these are people who are not visiting a dentist, regularly, right? So they had no cavities. They had perfect vision. They had perfect arches. Their teeth were perfectly formed. They were vibrant and healthy. And what he also observed was that as these people groups began to incorporate modern foods, industrialized foods into their diet, within a generation, they began to have cavities. Their arches were becoming deformed. They began to form diseases, and there was all this degeneration that was happening within one generation, which to me is amazing. And so he wrote a book. It's really a tome, and he completely lays out all of his findings. It's very detailed. He was a scientist along with being a dentist. And so what he found was that nutritional deficiencies are really the cause of degeneration, and not genetics, as we think of genetics as being a cause of why we have diseases. But it was more nutrition or lack of nutrition that was the cause.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Now, he didn't necessarily step into the whole model because that model didn't exist, of epigenetics, but we now know that we turn on and off genes that are going to make us well or make us unwell, and we pass on that set to our offspring. So if we're not eating well as we grow up, so we're growing up eating Twinkies and Big Macs and Coca-Colas,
right,
and Dr. Peppers, then you end up, basically passing on not just a genetic scheme, but the epigenetic settings for an unhealthy child. And then that goes to the next generation, and just that's really when you break it on down, and we look at the incidence of diabetes and heart disease and Alzheimer's, we're creating that with our food.
Correct. And not just food, toxins too, skincare, cleaning products, anything that goes on our skin, things we breathe in, the toxins in our food too. It all creates those metabolic changes that you talk about, epigenetic changes, and they are transgenerational, which means that for a woman of childbearing age today, what she eats today and what she uses on her skin and the cleaning products that she uses today can affect her great-grandchildren because of the changes that happen that are caused. What happens is one gene may get turned on that normally would have been turned off, or vice versa. A gene that would have been turned off gets turned on, that causes disease. And so all of the things that we're doing are detrimental to our health.
Now, there is hope in all this because,
Yes.
actually one of the stories you said in the book was that I guess a woman was effectively not living a good lifestyle, had a child, and her daughter was, had issues, and she cleaned up her nutrition, cleaned up some of the toxicity in her life. Her second child was much healthier.
Yes, he relates that story and kind of as proof, as it can happen within a generation, meaning, she had been deficient nutritionally. And her first child, she had terrible labor. It took her a long time to recover from labor. The child was anxious and stooping and had all of these, physical deformities. 4 years later, she had changed her diet. She'd gone back to a nutrient-dense diet. She was in labor for 3 hours. She recovered very quickly, and her child was very healthy, much healthier than the older sibling. So while these changes do happen in a generation, it can happen within, a generation. And it speaks to the power of food and nutrient-dense foods to promote health.
And I can't agree more. Like I said, the message of hope is that we can make changes today, and that's going to help us in the future. And while most of us are past our child-rearing years, this is a message we can pass on to the next generation, is let's fix these things and make things better. So if they start seeing the changes in us, then hopefully that will start it. Plus, if we just change our shopping habits, which I want to get into in a moment, that's going to change a lot as well.
Absolutely.
I walk into a grocery store today, and well, I'm not today, but when I walk into a grocery store,
right. Yeah.
I just see shelf after shelf after shelf of not food. I've come to recognize that those shelves, all the way from the one end to the other, 90% of the stuff that's in there, it may as all be dishwashing liquid, as far as I'm concerned, and dish powder and laundry powder for you to wash, because I don't want to eat any of it now. That's all fake food. And in your book, you go through and you pick one treat, which one thing that you happened to used to really like, but you did a very good detailed breakdown of what was in these Cheez-Its.
Right.
Can you? I don't want you to go through all of that, because that was that was pretty deep and dark. But can you kind of just go through and talk about what is this fake food stuff that we're being fed now, and fed in mass quantities and advertised to?
Well, first of all, a lot of the ingredients are inferior that they begin with, and then they take those ingredients and they denature them. They take what was real food and they strip it of everything that was good about it, and then they add those things back in the synthetic form, which our bodies do not recognize. So a lot of the ingredients are GMO ingredients, which I think we're going to talk about later. A lot of the ingredients come from factory farmed animals, which are sick and dying animals, and they're just full of chemicals. And the way that they create these processes, and the way that for instance, the flour, the way that they create the flour and the oils, they have to use chemicals. They use bleach, they use hexane, which is a neurotoxin. The EPA monitors the release of hexane into our environment. And so all the residue of all of those chemicals are left into the food. And when they get finished, it's really not it's not real food at all. It's just an industrialized product that is marketed as food.
And as I said, that makes up 90% of what's in most grocery stores today.
Right.
And then, so, we instruct people, well, shop around the perimeter of the store, because that's where you're going to find regular food. But even that, 90% or more of that is industrialized farming and other things that we're doing to the animals and to the plants. That's really kind of stripping it of any true value as a food. I call it industrial food. I'm sure there's a lot of different names we could kind of throw out there about it. It's some of the practices are just quite horrific. Could you take some time to kind of go through and explain to me, okay, why when I walk into my vegetable section, most of those vegetables are not actually good for me or might actually be harmful to me. And when I get over to the meat section, why most of that is a problem. And then, of course, now I get to dairy, and I've got the milk and eggs and cheese, and again, just another set of problems. Can you kind of talk through those kind of, as I'm walking around my grocery store, I'm kind of visualizing where things are. What am I actually looking at that's keeping it from being real food?
Okay. Well, let's just talk. We'll just start in the produce section, because that's usually the first section people walk into in a grocery store. Farming has become kind of a monoculture. So you'll have one particular farmer, and all he farms and all he grows are one particular vegetable. There's no crop rotation. He sprays his vegetable with pesticides and herbicides. The soil has been depleted of any nutrients. It's just, and so they have to, put all of these fertilizers in the soil to get it to grow. And so the vegetables that are even there they're not nutrient dense, like what Dr. Price talked about. They're, because if the soil is not full of nutrients and teeming with all of the beneficial enzymes and minerals, then the plants are also deficient. So there's that. But when we get to the meat section, those animals in factory farms, it's a deplorable conditions. I go into some detail about that in the book. I don't give all of the details because it's horrific. It is horrific the way these animals are treated. They're not in their natural environment. They're inside buildings. They are in pens that they can't even turn around in. They are sick. They've been given hormones. They are fed food that is not natural to them. For instance, cows are herbivores. They thrive on grasses, but they're given grains, and so they have trouble digesting those grains. So they're constantly given antibiotics. They're given hormones to make them grow faster. The female cows, when they give birth, their calves are immediately taken from them. So there's a lot of stress, and as you know, stress causes an inflammatory response. So they get more infections, and they're just sick. Poultry, please don't be deceived by the labels of cage-free, because all that means is that they're not in a cage. It does not mean that they actually have grass. There may be an opening in the chicken house for them to get outside, but there are hundreds of thousands of chickens in one house. And, if you're at the opposite end of the door, that chicken's never going to make it outside. They lived in cramped conditions. It's just horrific. It is just absolutely horrific. And so they do everything they can to make sure that animal is alive, to make it to the truck, to make it to slaughter. So we're eating sick animals. And how can we expect to be healthy and receive proper nutrition from animals that are sick and dying? The dairy industry, as we talked about cows a minute ago, they're sick. They're just sick. And then they pasteurize the milk, which denatures the proteins in the milk. Raw milk is full of pastured cows are full of enzymes and bacteria that help us break down those proteins that are typically harmful and people have trouble digesting. But the animals are just sick. Our vegetables are deficient in any kind of nutrients. And so the majority of the food, and we're not even talking about the processed foods that are in the grocery store. Those are industrial. They're full of chemicals, if they're even food at all. It's everything that we're eating. It's just deficient in what we need to be healthy and vibrant in our lives. Yeah.
And, like I said, I walk in, 90% of the food in there, or what's supposed to be food, is this fake food in boxes and in cans and jars and whatnot. And then, even if you try to walk the perimeter now, you're getting food that's not as nutritious. It was effectively bred to be resistant to the herbicides, be resistant to the pesticides. It was made such that it could be hauled long distances and then ripened right there before they get it to the store. So basically, a big wholesale system of moving this food that now lacks a lot of what we need. It's funny because I grew up in the country, so we had chickens, we had plum trees, and we grew a garden. We did the weeding. The kids got down and we pulled the weeds. If we saw some bugs in there, we would treat a little bit for the bugs, but not unless we just noticed something. Whereas today, they just go ahead and spray, assuming they might have bugs and they don't want to even bother with it. And then the plums, they'd come off a tree and they weren't, like I go in now and look at these plums. The plums are 3 times bigger. They're 3 times or 4 times or 10 times sweeter. And they're perfect. Whereas the plums we used to get, they all looked a little different. They all weren't, almost none of them were pretty, but we didn't care because they were going to go into a jam or they were going to go into my mouth right there as I was picking them. And the chickens, they had when we named them, they were providing us eggs. Yeah. We named the chickens, and we knew everything that went into those chickens as they were eating, and they were, around the yard. They were, pecking and getting what they needed, but they were never stressed. They were just allowed to be chickens. We just don't have that. And when I would think of a cow, and I think anyone would think, okay, well, you have this open field of a few acres, and there's maybe a couple of cows on it, but that's not what's happening with the industrialization of our food and trying to get food to us. So. And I've said this on the podcast many, many times, is the farmers market and some co-ops are your best opportunity to fix this by getting real food. So in a nutshell, Michele, if you had to define real food, what would that mean to you?
Real food. Real food. My favorite day of the week is the day that I go to the farmers market. I have gotten to know my farmers. They're my friends. And to me, real food is, first of all, it's not processed. It's not been refined in any way whatsoever. It is in the natural state of that food as it comes out of the ground or from a healthy, happy animal. It's been grown for vegetables. They've been grown in soil that has been amended and has been taken care of and has been tended to in such a way that it is just completely full of all of the nutrients and the vitamins that we need. And so they're nutrient dense. Real food is what I call nutrient dense foods. And you have to now, it really is important. You have to seek that out. And even some of the organic food in the grocery store, is not as nutrient dense. I mean, it's a better option than some of the other things in the grocery store. And if that's all you can do, then please, do that. But it's real food is that is the ingredient. Real food is the ingredient, and we've got to get back to sourcing our food, and it's worth every amount of energy that you can put into to source locally produced foods. And that was one of the things that Dr. Price emphasized too, was that, and like you've said, the food was not shipped from, another country or across the country. It's whatever is grown locally. That's what you need. That's what your body needs. And so it's just so important to find local sourced foods. And if you don't have a local, and it's worth it to even travel an hour to find a local farmer's market. And you can ask them, what are your farming practices? Do you use any chemicals? If so, what are you using? And they are more than happy to talk about what they do and to tell you and explain to you. But real food that's not been stripped, that's not been processed in any way whatsoever, that's real food.
Yeah. And I think the more this message gets out there, and the more we as the consumer. It's our wallet, and unfortunately,
Yes.
there's no advertising to sell zucchinis. The farmer's market that's selling these zucchinis that they picked this morning before they went out there. There's no advertising for that. But they've got multi-million-dollar budgets to advertise Pringles or Cheez-Its, and they're buying Super Bowl commercials.
Right.
So you see the money that's in this food product that they're able to spend that kind of money to get you to buy. I mean, most of the commercials you see on the Super Bowl are they're car commercials and they're food commercials.
Right. And we've been conditioned to believe that, these companies have our best interests at heart. They show us these warm, fuzzy commercials, families sitting around eating, whatever processed food they brought home from the grocery store, and they're happy and they're healthy. And it's just not the case. And we've been conditioned also to believe that, an occasion, if you've got allergies, that's normal. It's not normal. It's not normal. If you have a skin condition, eczema or psoriasis, or, that these things just happen and it's okay, and we'll just, take this pill or that pill and it makes it better. These things are not normal. These are not, we're just conditioned to accept whatever comes our way physically as being normal. And these companies, they're in the business to make money. They're not in the business to make sure that you're healthy. It's up to us as individuals. It's up to us as women, as moms, some dads, to make sure that we are nourishing our families with nutrient-dense foods. And so no, we've got to get rid of. We've got to stop the deception and wake up and realize that these companies are not about what's good for us. They are only about what's good for their bottom line.
Yes, and that's why there's not going to be a ton of experimentation unless it's happening in a university setting where they're going to look at food in a way that we really need them to look at food. And even then, the influence that that study will have over the policymakers isn't necessarily as strong as the lobbying effects of what big food can do.
Exactly.
And I think, so we talk about experiments, and I'll say today we are all subjects of probably the largest food experiment of all time. And the sad part of it is most of the time when a study goes wrong, they pull it. They say, "Oh my God, we're killing people. We've got to stop." Mm-hmm. Because the ethics just say stop. But we're going through something now with a product called Roundup, and then they came up with seeds that could survive Roundup, and so it's not, we don't know what the seed will do to us, and we actually do now know a little bit more about what Roundup will do to us, but we're ingesting this stuff every single day. Our children are ingesting this stuff. Our grandchildren are ingesting this stuff. Can you take a few minutes to talk about the whole thing about Roundup and why it's so insidious?
Yes. Roundup, the active ingredient in Roundup is called glyphosate. And it originally was created as a chelator. And what a chelator does is it binds the ingredients and metals and pulls them, and minerals, and pulls them out. So let's back up a little bit. Monsanto, we'll just go ahead and call them out, they wanted to create seeds that they could spray, because they have these huge fields, let's just say of corn. They have these huge fields of corn, and they're overrun with weeds, and it's too costly to hire people to come in and weed. And so they created genetically modified organisms, or genetically engineered organisms is really the more appropriate term, that could resist being sprayed. And what they found a bacterium in their waste dump that was resistant to the glyphosate, to the active ingredient in Roundup. And so they take this, and it was a bacterium, and so they took that bacterium and they spliced it into the DNA of the plant, so that the plant, when the plant grows, it's now resistant to the glyphosate. So it's sprayed on everything. The glyphosate, and it's not just the glyphosate. I know we talk a lot about the glyphosate. There was just recently, when I wrote the book, they were just beginning to, there were hundreds of lawsuits being filed. Since having written the book, one of those lawsuits has actually gone to trial out in California. The plaintiff's name was Lee Johnson. He was a custodian at a school, and he used glyphosate on the playground there, and he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Anyway, they won. It was amazing victory. Monsanto has hidden for all these years. They knew that it was cancer causing. The World Health Organization in 2015, made after some studies had come out and said that that glyphosate was a probable human carcinogen, and Monsanto, they knew this. They've known this all along, and it causes. It's just horrible. But it's not just the glyphosate. The surfactants that are also in the Roundup, which those ingredients, they're kind of inert ingredients, but they are what they open up the cell membranes so that the glyphosate can actually get into the individual cells. And so when the glyphosate in the Roundup is sprayed onto the plants, you can't wash it off. Because of that, it's been driven into the actual cells, so it's not like it's just on the surface of the plant. It can't be washed off. And so we are ingesting it, and it's causing, and it doesn't just cause one kind of problem. It causes about 14 different processes to happen simultaneously. It's not like, oh, okay, well, maybe this one will happen or this will happen. No, it's all 14 of these processes that it disrupts in the body simultaneously, which is why we have so much cancer. I could. There's so much.
No, yeah, I agree. I want to take a step back to the chelation, because
okay.
I think that to me, that's the one that you really have to wrap your head around what that means. And so I want to slow you down a little bit there, because when something binds to something else, basically it means it's unavailable. So I just ate, say an apple or some corn, and I expect to get certain minerals from that meal, from that corn. And my body needs those minerals.
Right.
But because of the glyphosate attaching and binding to those minerals, I'm not getting those in my food. So if I have the corn and then I'm also trying to get calcium from something else I ate that night, that's now all in my system, and they're going to bind, and that calcium's going to leave my system.
Right. The glyphosate that's sprayed on to whatever vegetable and whatever product, it binds with the minerals that we are getting, the minerals that are in the foods that we're eating, and it's pulling them out of the body. So it acts as a chelator in our bodies when we ingest it. It's also an antibiotic. So
it's messing up with our gut biome. And,
right.
Yeah. So it's just,
right.
Yeah, those processes, every one of them is important. And it's cancer. Yes, is a big thing. But there's so much more to it. And what I try to tell people is, if you look at nutrition and you truly understand, most people say, I can't afford organic. And I'll say, well, one, you look at what the healthcare costs are. I know that's really hard to wrap your mind around, but here's the other side of it. When you're eating nutritionally dense food, you don't have to eat as much of it.
Correct. And
so when I am eating a grass-fed steak, like if I walked into a normal steakhouse, I'm not going to say no to the steak they're serving. It is what it is. I'm there to eat, and I'm with friends or whatever. I'm not going to sit there and just say, okay, I can't eat this. I'm going to eat it. But I know for me to get the nutrition out of that steak, I'm going to have to eat the whole 12-ounce or 16-ounce steak. And I am.
That's a lot.
Versus, yeah. It is. That's 3 to 4 servings is what it actually is. Versus I can cook a grass-fed steak. I can cook 4 ounces of grass-fed steak and feel satiated because I got the nutrition I needed from that steak.
Right.
Everything about your hunger hormones and everything that's going on in your body, it tells you. It gives you that message because it turns on and says, "Oh, we're getting good nutrition here, so let's gauge this, pay more attention." Whereas, well, he's chewing, but I'm not getting any signals that we're getting what we need, and that's a big chunk of this.
Right. And so as it's chelating, it's pulling out the minerals. The body's not getting those minerals and the vitamins and the things that we need. So that hunger mechanism is still in process, and it's telling us that it needs more, nutrition. And so we're never satiated, as you say, and we still feel hungry even after we've eaten a big meal.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a core element here as we look at our overall health is it's making us eat more of the foods that we shouldn't be eating because we're looking for things that we need, which we know we can get from nutritionally dense real food. And I really it is upsetting me that we have to actually now use the term real food.
Yes. Then we have to take the adjective. And two, a lot of the processed foods are intentionally created to be addictive.
Oh yeah. There's those. I was talking about a Super Bowl commercial, and I'll just deflect to this for a second. But the guy is eating Pringles, and so he eats the Pringles. It's a pizza Pringles. So he says, pizza. And so I'm going to call him the victim. Now he had 2 friends with him, and they each had their own flavor. And so one of the other guys has a chicken flavor. He hands it to him. He puts 2 of them together and eats it and says, chicken pizza. The other friend hands him the barbecue chip, and he has chicken chip that another guy hands him, and he puts them all together. And he's like, barbecue chicken pizza. And I'm thinking the lesson of this is not to tell you that they have 3 different flavors. The lesson here is to tell you need to be eating multiple chips at one time to create your own taste experiment. And I'm thinking this is insane that they're teaching people to eat 3 chips at a time. But again, they've got the money to do it. So
right. Well, I mean, it's a whole industry. The food creating flavors is an entire industry.
Oh yeah. So Michele, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Wow, only 3. Nutrient-dense foods. Nutrient-dense foods, as Dr. Weston I. Price said, that is the biggest driver of disease, is our food is lacking in nutrient density. So nutrition, seeking out the most nutrient-dense foods you can find is probably the number one thing you can do for your health. It is the number one driver of everything else. Sleep is not something that we think about a lot of times as something that we should be doing for our health, but receiving adequate sleep, restorative sleep is so important for our health. Daylight savings time is an absolute menace to society because it's disruptive. It disrupts our circadian rhythms, and that is the time when our bodies detoxify. It is the time when the body repairs itself, and so many people are sleep deprived, or they're not getting really good restorative sleep. So that's the second thing I think that's really important that we overlook quite often. There are other things, but I want to mention this one thing that some people don't think about, and that's trauma. Whenever, anytime we've been through any kind of trauma, particularly as children, and it can be physical trauma, it can be emotional trauma. Our bodies hold on to that, and if you've done all kinds of things to get well, and you're still struggling and you're still having some problems, that's another area to look into to see, did you suffer any kind of adverse childhood, experience, or even as an adult, Have you suffered any kind of, extreme physical trauma or extreme emotional trauma? And working through that is a huge piece of wellness. If you've done all of the other things that you need to do, but you're still not quite where you want to be, that's one more area that we can look at to bring you into wellness.
Excellent. Now, Michele, if someone wanted to get in touch with you or learn more about the book, Informed Consent, where would you like for me to send them?
They can go to my website. It's MicheleStanford.com. It's Michele with one L. And there's a get in touch with me button there. There's also the social media. They can follow me on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. So they can use that to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/356, and I'll be sure to have links there for you to find Michele and be a part of what she's doing over there. So, Michele, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
I hope you took something valuable away from today's program. It's a very important topic for us to understand our food supply and understand our healthcare system and how that impacts our wellness. If you did enjoy today's episode, would you please leave us a rating and review on whatever application you're listening to this podcast on? It really does help the podcast, and so I really appreciate each and every review that's out there. I read each one, and I do take them to heart to make the show better for you. So thank you for that. We are just now starting to see the first bits of winter here, even down in sunny Florida. I was up in North Carolina for Thanksgiving week with my mother and my family. It was really nice to have that family time. And now we're settling back into, getting the house ready for Christmas and actually getting ready to put it on the market, which is a little scary, that we might actually sell our house out from under ourselves and not really have anywhere else to go for a little while. But we'll figure that out. Obviously, a move to Panama like we're planning has a lot of ups and downs, little things going on here and there. Not to mention that I'm trying to launch a book, The Wellness Roadmap. So lots of moving parts. We're less than a week away from the book going live. So another, like I said, big exciting thing going on in my life, lots going on in my life, but it'll all settle down soon enough. If you haven't checked out the Wellness Roadmap, you can go to wellnessroadmapbook.com. We also have pre-orders on the ebook. I'm offering it for 99 cents on the Kindle for a limited time. We'll launch the book. We'll leave it up for probably 5-7 days maybe. Let some folks have the book for next to nothing. Leave some ratings and reviews. Amazon is one of those interesting companies that just quite frankly will not show your book to other people if there aren't any ratings and reviews. So, this book could die on the vine if it doesn't have the support of readers like you. So thank you so much for all the ratings and reviews that you're going to leave on the Wellness Roadmap. I really do appreciate it. It's been a labor of love. It's definitely been a labor, but it's been something I've enjoyed learning from and doing. So thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness, and thank you for all of your support. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Carol Clements and discuss her book, Better Balance for Life. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.